What would you do if you were teaching 20 sections of kindergarten music? Yes, 20 sections of kindergarten music. Well, I've been there and I've played that game and I've learned a ton about music in early childhood. But the most important thing I've learned are the different things that I should focus on in kindergarten music to really lay the foundation for what I want to accomplish in my music curriculum later on. So here are 5 things to focus on in elementary music in kindergarten specifically. The first thing is to foster a love of music or introduce students to music making in the first place. When kindergarten students walk into my classroom, I don't expect them to have had any interactions necessarily with a music teacher before. And I also don't expect them to necessarily have any experience with an adult singing to them. So a lot of what happens in kindergarten music is getting students acclimated to this new singing and music making environment that they might not be used to other places. In addition to a lot of just getting them acclimated to that music making environment, I want to get my students comfortable with hearing lots of different styles of music. That means lots of different genres, lots of different languages, lots of different tonalities and meters, as much differentiation as possible. That way we're building up this library of experience for our students, even at a very, very young age. I also want my students to understand that there are different ways to engage with music making. So that might be through musical play, that might be with musical instruments, that might be with manipulatives like puppets or other types of things that we're moving around to help with our music making in class. And I also want them to know that engaging with music making can be just listening. So a big portion of my classroom in the kindergarten year specifically are song tales. I actually tend to end every single kindergarten class with a song tale where I'm taking a physical book and singing it to my students so that they can get used to somebody singing to them, and they also are very used to this idea of we sit together and we listen to a story, and it helps with their active listening. I'll include a list of my favorite books down below to use in my kindergarten classroom just in case you're looking for a few new favorites. In addition to fostering a love of music making, the second thing that I really like to focus on in kindergarten music is making sure that my students understand cooperative music making. Now, this is something new in kindergarten for a lot of these kids who have never been to school before. If they are coming into kindergarten and they might not have a lot of experience engaging with other kids their age, having to learn how to be in the community together, how to take turns, how to let one person be the leader, and then it's my turn to be the leader a little bit later, and it's just a little tricky. Even in the classroom where they're not used to sitting in desks, they're not used to what the routine of their grade level kindergarten classroom looks like, it can be a bit of a challenge. Now bring that into the music room where there's generally an open space, there's lots of exciting things like instruments and props and puppets and all these different things, and students aren't necessarily sure what to do with their bodies and what to do with their bodies and their voices when it comes time to do active music making in community with one another. So a lot of what I do in my classroom is taking those opportunities for students to engage with active listening when it's not quite their turn, and also when it is their turn, how to play together in community, in a group, in an ensemble with one another. That active listening piece is really, really huge in the kindergarten music classroom because we're spending so much time teaching songs and games and activities to students by rote. A lot of the way that we introduce new song material is through my turn, your turn, echo imitation, or doing things at the same time like a cumulative song where it's a simultaneous imitation, or when we're following a leader. So that active listening both with our eyes and our ears and really our whole bodies is a really important skill to learn. So a way that you can make this happen in your kindergarten classroom is to think about those singing games or activities that you're already doing and the ways that you can differentiate the groupings so that students have a chance to practice both their active listening and waiting and knowing when it's their turn to participate. Now you might be wondering already, we've already talked about 2 things, developing a foundational appreciation or love or fostering a love of music making and cooperative music making, but we haven't gotten into like the stuff that's on my curriculum map that I need to teach kindergarten. And for me, when I first start out the year, we're learning how to do school, and we're learning how to do school in the music room, and we're learning how to do school in the music room in community with one another. And we're also working on building up a vocabulary of experiences. Now, what does that mean? From the beginning of the year until at least winter break, I'm spending a lot of time engaging in musical play. Now, that doesn't mean that my activities don't have a purpose that I'm going to draw upon later on, because I want to make sure that everything I'm doing in my classroom is intentional and can serve like a finite curricular goal as time goes on. But when the year begins and kids are just getting used to what it looks like and feels like to be in the music classroom, I'm really focused on that embodied music making, that active music making, so we have that vocabulary of experience to draw upon later. So what this means is you might have to have, or you probably should have, a little bit of foresight into what the trajectory of your year is going to look like, those specific concepts and skills that you want to have kindergarten accomplish or have a situational awareness, if you will, about before the end of the year. That way you can choose the song repertoire and the activities that are fairly simple for students to engage with early on that you can draw upon later. So we're getting into singing, we're getting into speech, we're getting into early body percussion maybe, we're getting into rhythm sticks and drums and moving around the room and all of these different ways to engage with music so that we can draw from that embodied sort of library that we've built up later on. The fourth thing that I really focus on in kindergarten music is getting us closer to sort of those finite curricular goals, and that has to do with discrimination learning. So you might think of it mostly as opposites, or I like to say comparatives. That's a term that's often used because students are learning what something is by comparing it to what it is not. So if we take a concept like steady beat, something that students need to understand or experience before we get into steady beat is something as simple as stop and go. When we want to move into concepts that have to deal with students' singing voice, something that students have to have a situational awareness or experience doing is engaging in their voice with many different ways, whether that's speaking, whispering, singing, shouting, whatever it might be. Because they learn like, oh wait, that's not my singing voice because it's this thing. Oh wait, that's not a steady beat because there is no steady beat and we're stopped. So we're learning what something is by what it is not. And then of course we can get into those other things like faster versus slower, because this is faster than the other part of the game that we just played, or this is a higher register than this lower register over here, or this is a quieter and a louder portion of the song. So we're comparing the two, we're doing those opposites, but we know they're opposites by the comparison basis. Because we can say loud, well, louder than what? And we can say fast, and we could say, well, faster than what? So having that comparative, that discrimination learning is a really important piece of kindergarten. So as we've fostered this love of music making, after we've learned what it means to cooperatively learn in the music classroom, after we've gotten into this wealth of experience, we've started to explore some comparatives or some discrimination learning, then we can get into the foundational concepts of kindergarten. And the first two that are on my curriculum map after all of this exploring and doing and actively embodying music making are steady beat and vocal exploration. So all of that experience early on is kind of driving us toward these two concepts, and that's when we can start to put a finite learning target on the board that says, today in music, I will use my voice in different ways. Today in music, I will find the steady beat. Those types of things. When kindergarten comes into the classroom, we can't just start with steady beat if they've never been asked to listen and respond to music. We can't start with vocal exploration or finding our singing voice if they haven't been asked to play and use their voice in different ways. So all of these different experiences, all of these things that we're focusing on early on in kindergarten are leading us toward those curricular goals. And then we can use the experience that we've built up at the beginning of the year before we get to steady beat and vocal exploration to inform the decisions we make about those music making experiences. So the 5 things that I focus on with kindergarten at the beginning of the year is fostering a love of music making, figuring out how to cooperatively make music in the classroom, creating a vocabulary of experience, working on opportunities for discrimination learning, and then finally working toward that steady beat and vocal exploration, which are the first two like hard and fast concepts on my kindergarten curriculum map.